The Houthi rebels releasing footage showing an explosion and fires after the terror group attacked a Greek-flagged oil tanker in the Red Sea. The crew of the oil tanker abandoned it Thursday, and much of what happened does still remain unclear at this point. Tim Lenderking, the US Special Envoy for Yemen, saying this is, quote, another imminent environmental and navigational threat from the Houthis' reckless acts on a commercial ship in the Red Sea. Lenderking adding that the ship was carrying 1 million barrels of oil and it was on fire and adrift. A lot to this and really a lot to discuss over in the Middle East right now. So I do want to bring in a friend of the show, Mark Chandler, Director of Government Relations and Professor of Practice at Coastal Carolina University, also a former senior defense intelligence official. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, as always.
You're welcome, Josh, and good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, first off, I do want to talk a little bit here about that video that we just saw released by the Houthi rebels. Tell me what's going through your mind as you're watching that, because it's yet another major attack there on the Red Sea.
Well, that's a pretty graphic video, and I think it's telling of the larger issue that you see taking place in the Red Sea with the Houthis continuing to operate pretty much unimpeded and have a negative effect on shipping going through there. I mean, that's a very visible example of what's taking place. You know, the Houthis actually this week, that was their first attack in several days, but it was very successful. They're learning from all of their failed attacks and their successful attacks. It looks as though they came at this one in what I would call a multi-pronged attack. Some missiles were launched against it. Some small boats with fighters on board went against this ship, and it was very successful. They disabled it. You see the fire. The crew had to abandon it. And now, with all of that oil on there, it is just floating aimlessly in the Red Sea. I know the Greek company, is trying to figure out a way to get it. But you're looking at an environmental disaster that could see an oil spill, probably the second or third largest oil spill in history, affecting the Red Sea, the coast of the Arabian Peninsula, or the eastern coast of parts of the continent of Africa. So that's the tragedy that you could be seeing because of what we have, nothing holding back the Houthis from making these attacks.
And I did want to ask you, because we know that the U.S. has launched some attacks on Yemen and on the Houthis overall in retaliation, so to speak, for this. But it seems as though those U.S. attacks really aren't doing much to deter the Houthis from their actions in the Red Sea.
No, they're not. The U.S. has taken that reactive approach, and so they're hitting things. It has a temporary lull. No one is stopping the resupply of Iranian weapons and munitions and advisors into there. So the Iranians are still able to get the missiles, the UAVs, and all of the military supplies the Houthis need in there. The longest gap, actually, Josh, for stopping the Houthis was when Israel struck the port of Hodeidah a couple of weeks ago after that UAV attack in Tel Aviv. That actually shut the Houthis down for the longest period since they've stopped fighting. So you really have to go back. You have to be very serious about the attacks to stop the Houthis, and you also have to interdict the Iranian resupply, which has not been done effectively at all.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the other situations that are developing there in the Middle East, because as I mentioned, there are quite a few of them here, and we do know that about 100 rockets were fired by Hezbollah just yesterday over a fairly short period of time at northern Israel. A lot of fires that broke out there, as we've seen happening over the past several weeks and several months. Does it seem like the attacks there by Hezbollah on Israel are actually intensifying? Is there any end in sight to those attacks?
Well, to answer your question directly about intensifying attacks, I would say absolutely. We're seeing a new level of intensity over the last 2 weeks, especially this week, where Hezbollah is firing more and more rockets. And the concern for Israel is they're becoming more accurate. So in part of those rockets that were fired yesterday, they had a direct hit on a military location that was responsible for air defense in northern Israel. So Hezbollah hasn't been able to do that very effectively, but now they're doing it. During the week, there were days where they were firing anywhere from 50 to 200 rockets against northern Israel. They're starting to have more damage. more effects there, more injuries in northern Israel. So you're starting to see that escalation by Hezbollah. And don't forget, they're not going to run out anytime soon. They've got tens of thousands of rockets and missiles and UAVs they can use. So this is a drop in the bucket for them. So you see that escalation with Hezbollah. The second part of what's been going on is Israel is getting more and more serious. I know we have talked in the past about their preemptive strikes, but this week they struck twice in the Bekaa Valley. That's a lot further north in Lebanon, but that's also key locations for Hezbollah logistics facilities and command and control facilities. They think they're protected up there because Israel rarely goes up there, but twice in 1 week, they went up there and did some significant damage to some of the supply capabilities for Hezbollah, in addition to all the strikes they've done down in southern Lebanon, taking out some leaders down in that area. So you're starting to see this escalate. I would say, short of a ground offensive, we're as close to open war as we can be. I would think that would be the next level where we're going to see. But we're fighting daily and in very intensive operations, both from Hezbollah and from Israel right now. We're close to all-out war.
Israel is fighting a war on several fronts. I want to talk about the one going on in Gaza, of course, the major war that was sparked by Hamas on October 7th. There's been these ceasefire talks that are expected to resume tomorrow over in Cairo. Ceasefire hostage release talks. The White House is kind of pushing back against different reports that say that the ceasefire has essentially fallen apart. They say that progress is being made. I'm not sure if you can provide any real insight here, but I did want to ask you, why is there so much secrecy, a lot of behind the scenes and a lot of unknowns about ceasefire possible hostage release deal?
Well, if I can address the first part of this question, and I think if we were to listen to John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesperson, everything's rosy and we're doing great. And I have to be honest with you, that's a little bit disingenuous as we start to focus on things. I mean, they do want to keep up the positive spin on how things are progressing, but listen to this. Hamas has not been involved in any of these peace talks in the last 2 weeks. They haven't had a delegation there. So to say that they're making progress, well, that's great. There's progress on the Israeli side, progress by all the mediators, including the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt. But what about Hamas? The only statements from Hamas is they've rejected what we call this bridging aspect to it. And now to answer the other part of your question, that's really what we're talking about, the bridging. We're trying to get, we being all the mediators, the U.S., not Hamas at this time, trying to get to the first part of the negotiations and the ceasefire, where we actually start to exchange hostages for some prisoners and a cessation of hostilities in phase one. There's a couple of key sticking points here. The first is the Philadelphia corridor and then Nevetzan corridor. Those are two corridors that Israel wants to maintain security so that they can stop the flow of Hamas weapons and fighters across from Egypt. That's critical because Hamas absolutely disagrees with any Israeli military in the Gaza Strip. But that's a key component to Israeli security is the security, especially of the Philadelphia corridor. I say this because in 2005, Egypt was given the responsibility to secure the corridor. That failed. And that failed to allow Hamas continued fighters, weapons, resupply, everything it needed to go through the corridor. So that's why it's important to Israel's security. The second part, and this gets into some of the secrecy aspect you're asking about, Josh, and that's where we start to talk about which hostages. We know Israel found, unfortunately, some dead hostages recently, last week. And so now we start to get in how things are going. Let's get as many hostages out in that first phase, because there's no guarantee that we'll make it to a second phase. So who are these hostages? What are the names? And are we guaranteed that those are still alive? It's still unsure how many are alive and how many bodies are still left there in the Gaza area. So I think that's trying to protect some of the secrecy there. And then in any negotiation, no one wants to call out the true person or the true side that's holding things back, and that's Hamas. Why we don't want to call out Hamas, I don't know, but they're the ones stopping the progress. They're the ones that have always pushed back. Now, a renewed set of senior level negotiations. So those have all been technical that we've talked about, the bridging aspect. The senior level negotiators start tomorrow in Cairo. Hamas is going to Cairo, but this is nuanced. They're not in the negotiations. They will not participate in the negotiations. They'll just be there and let somebody come talk to them. So I would love to be hopeful. I would love to say that we're going to go forward and we're going to find a positive resolution. But so far, the key components, Hamas has pushed back on every one of them. I just don't feel comfortable that we're going to make it. I mean, hope is not a plan. I hate to be a Debbie Downer for this, but I don't really want to kind of see this fall apart when we have a chance.
One thing that we heard from Israeli media earlier on this week, really just a few days ago here via Palestinian sources, is that Hamas is actually looking at attacking Israelis abroad rather than a direct attack on Israel in retaliation, so to speak, for the death of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas. Even though Israel has not actually said we were responsible for that, Iran has said we will punish you for it. So again, Hamas saying that they are going to attack Israelis abroad. What do you make of that? Because if that were to happen, if Israelis were attacked in other countries, doesn't that potentially lead to really an all-out war?
Well, it absolutely could lead to a broader war as we work our way through this, Josh. And here's the thing. First, let's not take the Hamas threat as an empty threat. Let's take it as a valid threat. And what we have to look at is, one, there are Hamas fighters outside of Gaza. We have to look at that. They're based in Lebanon. We know that there's fighting cells in Lebanon. They're in Turkey. Turkey's taken on a lot of Hamas fighters that have been injured in the war, and they're putting them in their hospitals, and they're working through that. And Turkey is a strong conduit for Hamas and Palestinian refugees. So when you look at how Hamas fighters can actually leave the Middle East and work their way into Europe and America, I don't want to get political about our border, but our southern border is just not secure. And we do know that terrorists have made it across the border. So when you combine all of that, you have a valid threat. You also have a valid threat where you have Hezbollah fighters and terrorists already with cells across Europe, South America, and likely in the United States, along with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Quds Force operators out there doing the same. So you have a valid threat. Today, this morning in France, a synagogue was attacked. And so you have seen those attacks. So the type of attack that could happen is, one, these cells actually moving, setting up operations in the United States, and that has been done, and in Europe, and working their way in, or what we call in the intelligence community, inspired attacks. And so that's where somebody takes up the cause of the Palestinians. In this case, really, it's the Hamas terrorists. They take up the cause and they conduct some sort of attack in the name of. So I think you need to be aware of this, especially in Europe. And unfortunately, I'd have to say, even in the United States, against Israeli interest, anywhere out there are susceptible to these type of attacks. Escalation, it depends on how a country is going to respond to that and how to respond overseas or domestically. The U.S. still hasn't struck back for the attacks on its Syrian base and Iraqi bases against the Iranian-backed Shia militia in Iraq. So I can't tell you it's going to escalate or not because I don't know what that targeted country would do.
We heard from Meta on Friday. We've already heard from Microsoft. We've heard from Google. They've released some information about Iran-backed hackers that were trying to get into the different accounts of presidential candidates, staffers on presidential tickets, pretty much, for Biden, Trump. And then we heard from Meta yesterday. They said that it appears that those Iranian-backed hackers were actually trying to infiltrate the WhatsApp accounts of different staffers for Biden and Trump. What do they hope to accomplish by doing that overall? What are you able to do by hacking somebody's WhatsApp account?
Well, first and foremost, I think you're going to create a sense of vulnerability by those people using such applications or the email attacks. And you start to look at this. Let me just say real quick, do not underestimate Iranian cyber capabilities. They have a very capable and active cyber force working for the IRGC, working for the national government levels, if you will. So going after this, they want to create vulnerability, a sense of that. I think going after these personal type of applications such as WhatsApp. And then let me try to create some misinformation and disinformation. So if I'm attacking your cyber capabilities, what you're going to use, you may not be sure that who you're talking to is actually who you're talking to. And so now I've got doubt, and I'm starting to spread that. And if I broaden this out, Iran absolutely is going to try to interfere in our elections. The hacking on the emails, the hacking on WhatsApp, that's just, part of it. All the false accounts that they're going to set up. If we go back to the testimony of the Director of National Intelligence in July, it is a proven fact that Iran was behind some of the protests in the United States, both setting up false accounts, providing some financial support, and helping egg on those protests on the college campuses. So we know that they have a history of trying to destabilize things. So that's what we're trying to get. That's what they want, is create more destabilization. And during election season, this is just going to ramp up. And if I may, just talking about not just Iran, but Russia and China are also doing the same thing, even on a much larger scale. So we as Americans, or actually anybody in the world, need to be sure of what you're looking at, need to be sure of the information. Don't just take what you see at face value. You have to look at it. We have to have some responsibility, because this is going to get worse. Any doubt that can be created is what they're going to try to do. And they're being successful in creating that dissension in an already charged political environment here.
And Mark Chandler, so many different topics to discuss, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and help break them down. Before I let you go, is there anything else that you want to add really about any of this?
Well, Josh, we covered a lot this morning that just kind of went all the way from the Red Sea, all the way to cyber capabilities here. I think if we're aware and we're just seeing what's happening as we move forward, I think Americans need to be aware. We need to be aware that, we have adversaries trying to do things to us, and be smarter consumers of the information, if you will. Be aware of what's going to happen. Dig for our own facts and information as we start to work our way through. It's a dangerous world. I'm not trying to be a downer about it. I'm just trying to make us more aware of what's happening out there, what to be aware of, and how to move forward as we look at this. Because the Middle East is critical. Israel's a critical ally for us in the Middle East. But what's happening there is so much beyond the Middle East. And you can see the direct effects it's going to have on our election process even.
All right, Mark Chandler there, Coastal Carolina University. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and break it all down. We appreciate it.
Josh, I was glad to be here. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day.
You too.